Hello, sleepy cuties. It's time to drift into the dark corners of dreams, where stories whisper like candle flames in empty rooms. Tonight, we will wander into the haunted past of one of Adventure Time's most mysterious souls, Marceline, the Vampire Queen. But before she was the Queen of the Night, she was just a little girl with shadows too big for her small hands to hold. So close your eyes and let the blankets wrap you tight and listen to the ghostly lullabies of Marceline's childhood. A dark lullaby of Ooh. The land of Ooh was not always candy colors and laughter. Once it was a broken place, scarred by war, where silence hung heavy in abandoned buildings, and ghosts walked freely in forgotten streets. Marceline was born into that silence. Her lullabies were not sung by mothers in rocking chairs. They were hummed by the wind, slipping through cracked glass, and by spirits who never truly left their ruined homes. Sometimes in the quiet, Marceline would hear faint music, as if someone was strumming a guitar in another room. But when she peeked inside, the room would be empty. Only the dust would dance in the air, and the echo of strings would fade into the dark. Whispers of a forgotten house. Marceline's first home was not made of candy or castles. It was a shadowy, crumbling house, where the walls sagged like tired shoulders, and the floors whispered with every step. At night, the house would sigh. Old beams creaked, doors slowly groaned open, and the sound of dragging footsteps would shuffle in the hallway. Marceline was only a child, but she already knew. She wasn't alone. She would lie under her blanket, holding her toy close, and watch the ceiling as shadows drifted across it, shadows that didn't belong to her. Sometimes a soft voice would call her name, Marceline, long and stretched, like a song carried through the fog. But when she looked, there was no one standing there. The lonely child in the shadows. She was lonely. Her father, Hunson Abadir, was not a gentle figure, and the human world she once belonged to was gone. So Marceline found company in the shadows. The ones that whispered from corners. The ones that crawled beneath her bed. She would talk to them, and sometimes they would answer back. They told her stories about fires that never went out, about people who never found their way home, about doors that should never be opened. But to a child, even ghostly voices can feel like friends, nightly ghostly visitors. One night, Marceline awoke to the sound of a lullaby. It was soft, broken, like someone humming through tears. She followed the sound into the hallway. The air grew colder with every step. Her bare feet pressed against the cold wooden floor, and the song grew louder and sadder. At the end of the hallway stood a figure, tall, thin, glowing faintly blue. Its face was blurred and like a painting washed away by rain. Marceline reached out her small hand, but the figure only tilted its head and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." And then it vanished. The hallway fell silent, but the air still trembled, as if the ghost had left a piece of its sorrow behind. The door that shouldn't open. Marceline grew used to the visitors. Ghosts of soldiers, ghosts of children, ghosts with empty eyes. But there was one place even the spirits seemed afraid of. A door at the end of the house. It was locked, always locked. And sometimes at night, Marceline would hear scratching from behind it. Not like claws, but like fingers. Fingers desperately trying to get out. Once, when the moon was high, she heard a voice from behind the door. It wasn't calling her name this time. It was begging. "Let me out. Please, oh, let me out." Marceline reached for the handle, her small hand trembling. The metal was ice cold, colder than anything she had ever touched. And as she wrapped her fingers around it, the door shuddered. Something on the other side pushed back. Hard. She screamed, and the house fell silent. The scratching stopped. The begging faded. But she knew the door was waiting for her, waiting for another night. And so, little dreamer, our story pauses here, with Marceline, the lonely child, in a haunted house filled with whispers, and a locked door that hides something desperate and dangerous. When you drift deeper into dreams tonight, imagine the hallway, the shadows, and the sound of footsteps following softly behind you. Sleep didn't come easily to Marceline that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard it again, the scratching, the begging, the heavy push against the locked door. Her toy bear slipped from her hands, and she shivered under the blanket. But even then, she could hear faint breathing in the walls. Not her breathing. Something else. Something waiting. The corridor of shadows. The next evening, the house felt different. The hallway stretched longer than before. Every picture frame leaned crooked, and the air smelled faintly of smoke. The shadows didn't cling to the corners anymore. They moved, like a parade of thin, dark figures, sliding across the walls, reaching for her as she walked. One whispered in a voice, sharp as broken glass, "Don't go to the door." Another hissed, "It's already awake." But children are curious, and Marceline's feet carried her closer. The lock that weeps. The door loomed at the end of the hallway. Its wood was warped and blackened, as though burned from the inside. The metal handle was pale and cold, still scarred from her last touch. As she stared, a tear of water slid down the keyhole. Not a water. Blood dark, slow, dripping onto the floorboards. And then came the whisper. "Marceline, little girl, please." The voice was trembling, desperate. But under it, there was a growl. Something not human. Something hungry. The first opening. That night, when the moon was swollen and red, Marceline did what no child should have done. She found a rusted key hidden beneath the stairs. Her small fingers trembled as she pressed it into the lock. The door shuddered. The wood groaned, and a long sigh escaped, like something exhaling after years of silence. The key turned. The door cracked open. A cold wind swept through the hallway, snuffing out every candle. The house fell into darkness. Inside the room was not a room at all. It was a pit black, endless, filled with the faint sound of voices screaming, all tangled together. The thing behind the door. At first she thought it was only smoke, a dark mist spilling out and sliding across the floor. But then it rose higher and higher. The mist formed into a shape. A body that wasn't solid, with too many arms, too many fingers stretching toward her. Its face was a blur of mouths, all whispering her name at once. "Marceline, hungry, alone, stay with us." The creature stepped forward, and every step made the house shake, made the walls splinter, made the shadows scream and scatter. Marceline tried to run, but the hallway stretched longer and longer, like she was trapped inside a dream she couldn't wake from. A father's shadow. Just as the creature reached for her, a rip of fire tore through the air. Hansen Abadir, her father, stepped from the darkness. His eyes burned with red hunger, and his grin split the shadows. "You opened the door, little girl," he said. His voice was both proud and angry. "You let them out." With a single swipe of his clawed hand, the mist creature shrieked, its mouth screaming all at once, and it was pulled back into the pit. The door slammed shut, the lock sealing itself with a hiss. But Marceline would never forget. The voices, the eyes, the endless hands reaching for her. That night, Marceline learned two things: that her house was not safe, and that her father was something even scarier than the ghosts. When she closed her eyes again, she could still hear it. Not gone, not silenced, only waiting. The scratching returned. The whispers returned. The door was not finished with her. After the door slammed shut, the house was never the same. Windows seemed to stare at Marceline, their cracked glass glinting like eyes. The staircase creaked in patterns, like footsteps pacing when no one was there. And at night, she swore the walls whispered. Not one voice, but many, layered, trembling, all murmuring her name as she tried to sleep. The shadows no longer stayed in corners. They crawled across her floor, climbed her bed, and hovered just above her face, as if curious if she was still breathing. The whispers that wander. Marceline thought it would stop if she left the house. So one morning she ran, bare feet against cold grass, clutching her toy bear close. But the whispers followed her. Through the dead fields, through the abandoned towns, through the broken streets of a world still healing from war. Everywhere she went, she felt it. The weight of eyes she couldn't see. The faint sound of fingernails scratching across stone. And when she sat to rest beneath a crooked tree, the tree shivered, as if something unseen had climbed into its branches, watching her from above. A friend who isn't a friend. One evening, as the sun bled red into the horizon, Marceline saw another child. A little girl with tangled hair, pale skin, and eyes dark as wells. The girl smiled. "Do you want to play?" she asked. Her voice was thin, stretched too far, like fabric ready to tear. Marceline's heart leapt. She had been so lonely. She followed the girl into a clearing. They laughed, they sang, they even danced in the ashes of an old playground. But when the moon rose, the girl's body began to fade. Her feet no longer touched the ground. Her hands slipped through Marceline's as if they were smoke, and her voice, once playful, grew hollow. "You shouldn't have opened the door," she whispered. "They're all coming now." The girl melted into the air, leaving only the smell of burnt paper, shadows in the moonlight. That night, Marceline camped beneath the stars, but sleep would not come. The grass around her shifted, as if countless invisible hands were brushing against it. The trees groaned, bending toward her. And far across the field, shapes gathered, dozens of them, pale blue glowing faintly, their mouths opening wide in silent screams. They did not walk. They glided. They drifted closer and closer, until Marceline felt the chill of their presence tightening around her chest. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks, and whispered, "Please, leave me alone." But the spirits only whispered back, "Never." The old song. When fear consumed her, Marceline did the only thing she knew. She sang. Her voice was small, fragile as cracked glass, but it carried through the night. A lullaby she remembered from long ago, half forgotten, half her own invention. And strangely, the spirits listened. The figures froze, their empty faces tilted toward her, their mouths silent. The song drifted like a spell, wrapping around the haunted field, and for a moment, just a moment, the ghosts began to fade. But not all of them. One stayed. A tall, thin figure with arms like branches, eyes black and endless. It leaned close and whispered into her ear, "I like your song. Sing again, or I'll never leave." A child of shadows. Marceline understood then. The door had not just opened a room. It had opened a path, a passage between her and the world of spirits. They would follow her, wherever she went, whatever she became. She was no longer just a child. She was a child marked by shadows, a child the spirits could not ignore. And as she curled into her blanket beneath the stars, the tall figure still looming just beyond her reach, she realized something dreadful. She might never truly be alone again. Marceline's eyes finally closed beneath the cold stars. But the darkness she entered was not sleep. Not really. She stood again in the hallway of her old house. The crooked pictures stared down at her. The walls pulsed with whispers, and the locked door waited at the end. Her feet moved without her wanting them to. Step by step, her small hand reached for the handle again. The keyhole wept black tears. The scratching returned louder, sharper, as if claws raked against the inside. When she touched the door, it swung open by itself. And behind it was not the pit, not the mist, but her own reflection. A second Marceline. Same face, same eyes, but pale, hollow, with a mouth too wide, stretching into a smile that didn't belong. The copy that spoke. The reflection stepped out of the doorway. It moved in silence, but its shadow slithered across the walls, longer, sharper than it should have been. "Hello," it said softly, with Marceline's voice, but broken like a lullaby sung through broken glass. "I'm you, the you that belongs to the door, the you that never left." Its smile widened, and blood-dark tears ran down its cheeks. "You opened the way. Now we can switch places." The reflection reached forward. Its cold fingers brushed her cheek, and the hallway shook, as if the entire dream was splitting in two. The song that shatters. Marceline trembled, her voice cracking as she began to sing again. The same lullaby from before, a fragile thread of sound in the storm of whispers. But this time, the reflection sang with her, word for word, note for note. Except its song was darker. Each note bent downward, sinking like stones into water, dragging hers with it. The two voices tangled hers and its until they became one dreadful harmony, so heavy, so hollow, that the walls of the dream collapsed. The hallway crumbled. The floor split open, and Marceline fell. The pit of faces. Down, down, down she fired. I fell into the same black pit she had seen before, but now it was clearer. The mist was not mist. It was faces, hundreds of them. Mouths gaping, eyes rolling, all reaching toward her with hands that were not hands. Some were soldiers. Some were children. Some were shapes she could not even name. And they all screamed her name. "Marceline, Marceline, Marceline." The voices blended into a storm, a chorus of hunger, echoing through her chest until she could no longer tell if it was outside her or inside. The awakening. She woke with a gasp. The stars were still above her. The field still stretched silent and endless. but her toy bear was gone. And in its place, beside her blanket, lay a second shadow, not attached to her, not attached to anything. It stretched across the grass, long, thin, and smiling. The shadow's mouth moved, though no sound came. And then, faintly, she heard it inside her head. We'll see you again in the dreams. The sleepless child, Marceline, did not close her eyes again. The night was long, and the spirits never left. The tall figure stood just beyond the reach of moonlight. The faceless child laughed faintly in the wind, and the second shadow slid closer, inch by inch, until it lay curled beside her like a twin. She was awake, but the dream had followed her, and there was no door to shut anymore. From that night on, sleep was never safe for Marceline, because whenever she drifted away, the pit waited, the reflection waited, and the whispers of the door would always find her. When the sun finally rose, Marceline wandered back to the house. The one with the sighing walls, the crooked pictures, and the locked door that never truly stayed shut. But this time, her father was waiting. Hudson Abadir stood in the doorway, tall and terrible, his shadow stretching across the broken floorboards like a stain. His grin was wide, sharp, his eyes burning with a fire that never warmed. "You've been playing with my toys," he said softly. His voice was calm, but underneath, it growled like an animal chained too tight. The truth of the door. Marceline's lips trembled. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "The door, it called me." Hudson's grin widened. "That door has been calling for a very long time. But not to you, child. It calls because of me." He stepped closer, and the air thickened, smelling of ash and iron. "That door is not a prison. It is the passage, a wound in the world. And every wound bleeds. The spirits are mine, Marceline. Every whisper, every shadow, every hungry hand, they belong to me. A father's lesson." He placed a clawed hand on her shoulder, cold, heavy, unshakable. "Do you hear them?" he asked. "Even now they call your name. But it is not you they want. It is the blood you carry. My blood." Marceline's heart sank. Her toy bear, her lullaby, none of it could protect her from that truth. She was his daughter, marked by his darkness, bound to his shadows, the banquet of spirits. And Hudson led her to the hallway. The door stood waiting, its lock cracked, its frame trembling. He snapped his fingers. The door flew open. The pit yawned wide, and the spirits rose, a flood of faces and hands, a tide of endless mouths screaming. Marceline shrieked and covered her ears. But Hudson only laughed. "Do not fear them," he said. "Watch." He opened his own mouth, and the spirits bent toward him. One by one, they streamed into him like smoke, vanishing into his body. Their screams twisted into silence, until the pit was empty once more. Hudson wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Delicious," he said, "as they always are. The inheritance." Marceline trembled. "Why? Why me?" Hudson crouched low, his burning eyes level with hers. "Because you are mine. And someday, you will feed on them too. The shadows are not your enemies, little girl. They are your inheritance." He leaned closer, his grin stretching wider than it should. "One day, you will open doors of your own. And when you do, they will never stop following you. A daughter's fear." That night, Marceline lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked, the walls sighed, and the door pulsed faintly with light. She tried to sing. She tried to push the shadows away, but her voice cracked, and the lullaby dissolved into sobs. And when she turned her head, her father's shadow was already there. Not his body, just a shadow, leaning over her bed, smiling. It whispered with all the voices of the pit combined. You cannot run from what you are. Marceline pulled the blanket over her head. But the whisper followed her into the dark, curling into her ears and slipping beneath her skin. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a hunger awaken. Small at first, but growing. A hunger that wasn't hers. A hunger that belonged to him. After her father's words, the house grew quieter. Too quiet. The walls no longer sighed. The stairs no longer creaked. The whispers hushed themselves. But silence in a haunted place is never peace. It is waiting. Marceline lay awake, listening to the quiet, her toy bear clutched tight. And in the stillness, she realized the house was holding its breath. The dream that spreads. When sleep finally came, it came heavy, like sinking into deep water. She opened her eyes inside the dream and found herself not in the hallway, not by the door, but floating in an endless black. All around her, faces began to bloom from the dark. Children, soldiers, strangers, all drifting in a circle, closing in, whispering her name in endless echoes. But this time, she didn't wake. This time, the dream stretched into her waking. When she opened her eyes in the real world, the faces were still there, hovering above her bed, watching, the hunger in her blood. She tried to scream, but no sound came. The faces pressed closer, mouths open wide, pulling the warmth from her body. She felt cold seep into her vein, a hollow ache in her chest, a gnawing hunger that didn't belong to her, but grew inside her all the same. And then she heard her father's voice, though he was nowhere to be seen. Do you feel it, little girl? The hunger, that is the gift. That is the curse. You are mine, forever. The spirits moan, 1,000 voices in one, and Marceline knew she could not separate herself from them anymore. The door without walls. The next night, the locked door was gone, but its presence was everywhere, in the corner of her room, in the hollow of her chest, in the sound of her lullabies. She had become the door. Wherever she went, shadows leaked through her steps. Wherever she sang, ghosts leaned closer to listen. There was no running, no hiding. The door was open, and it would always be open. The girl and the shadows. Years would pass. The world would grow brighter. Candies and kingdoms would rise, and laughter would fill the land again. But not for Marceline. Even as she grew, even as she laughed and sang and made friends, the shadows never left. They followed her through forests, through deserts, through the farthest corners of Ooh. In her dreams, the reflection waited. In her music, the spirits hummed along. And in her heart, her father's hunger lived on. A reminder that she was never truly free. Oh, the secret. Tonight, we set aside the shadows of Marceline's past and turn our gaze to another haunted soul. You know him as the Ice King. Silly, lonely, strange. But before the beard, before the madness, there was Simon Petrikov, a man who wore a crown, and that crown was cursed. So close your eyes, let the cold night settle around you, and follow me into the frost-bitten memories of the man who would be king. A gift from the frozen north, long ago, before Oo was filled with candy castles and kingdoms. Simon traveled the world, collecting old treasures and forgotten relics. One day he found it, an ancient crown, hidden deep in the ice of a northern cavern. Its jewels glimmered faintly, pale blue like trapped stars. At first it was beautiful, a miracle even. But the moment Simon placed it on his head, something began to whisper. The voice was faint, like wind curling through cracks in stone. But it was there, and it never left. The first whispers. At night, Simon would lie awake, the crown resting on the table beside him. And still he heard it. Simon! Simon! It called his name so gently, so patiently, like a lullaby sung through frozen lips. When he put the crown back on, the whispers grew louder. They promised him visions. They promised him power. They promised him a kingdom, Otto, of endless ice. And Simon, lonely and curious, listened. The change in the mirror. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly, Simon began to change. When he caught his reflection in the glass, he saw his eyes flicker blue. When he spoke, his voice carried an echo, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Once he woke with frost crawling across his hands, curling over his fingers like veins of glass. He tried to laugh it away, but deep down, he knew the truth. The crown was no treasure. It was a wound, a curse that bled cold into his soul. The people who feared him, those who knew Simon, began to keep their distance. His smile grew too sharp, his laughter too hollow. And when he reached to greet a friend, ice spread from his fingers, burning their skin with frost. The whispers laughed inside his head. They do not understand you, Simon, but we do. We will never leave you. We are your only friend. Simon tried to throw the crown away. He buried it in snow, cast it into rivers, locked it in boxes. But somehow, always, it found its way back to him. The night of first snow. One night, as Simon wandered the dark streets, a storm rose without warning. Snow tumbled down in thick sheets. The wind screamed like a beast, and the city froze beneath his feet. People ran. Windows shattered. The air burned cold in every breath. And there, in the center of the storm, stood Simon, the crown glowing on his head, his eyes empty and shining blue. The whispers roared now, a choir of frozen voices, chanting one thing again and again. King, king, king. Simon fell to his knees, clutching his head, crying into the snow. But the crown only tightened its grip, ice forming a ring around his skull, as if it had become a part of him, a haunting without end. From that night on, Simon was never alone. Even when he stood in silence, even when he begged for peace, the whispers curled in his mind. They told him he was chosen. They told him he would rule. They told him he would lose himself piece by piece until nothing remained but the Ice King. And as he closed his eyes that night, the snow still falling, the voices sang him to sleep, a cold, endless lullaby. The first forgetting. After the night of the storm, Simon tried to live as he once had. He brewed tea. He hummed little songs. He read his books beneath the lamp's soft glow. But something was wrong. When he opened his journal, whole pages meant nothing to him. The words blurred. The handwriting looked unfamiliar. And when he looked into the mirror, He could not recall the man staring back. Was he Simon? Or someone else? The whispers answered softly. You are ours. You are the king. The crown's caress. He tried to remove the crown, but each time he lifted it away, pain shot through his skull, like claws raking down his mind. He would scream, he would beg, and the whispers would coo in his ear. Shh, don't cry. Keep us close. We'll make the pain go away. So he kept it, not because he wanted to, but because he could not bear the silence without it. The woman in the snow. There was one person who still tried to reach him. A woman who called his name with warmth, who held his hands despite the frostbite. Simon, she whispered, you must fight it. But her voice was soft against the storm in his head. Her face grew harder to remember. Her smile faded into fog. Even her name slipped from his lips like melting ice. One day he looked at her and asked, who are you? And her tears froze before they could fall. The song that shivered. Alone, Simon began to sing. Little songs, fragments of lullabies. But the words twisted as they left his mouth, as turning cold, turning sharp. Instead of love, his voice carried hunger. Instead of comfort, it carried grief. And in the echo of his own voice, the whispers sang back. Yes, yes. Sing for us, King. Sing forever. Snow fell even when the skies were clear. His footsteps left frost wherever he walked. The world itself seemed to mourn with him. The forgotten warmth. He woke one morning to find letters scattered across his desk. Dozens of them. Written in his own hand. Each one began the same. My name is Simon Petrikov. I must remember. But as he read, the words dissolved into nonsense. Lines twisted. Ink bled. Pages froze and cracked in his grip. By the time he reached the last letter, he could not even read his own name. Only the whispers remained. The coronation of ice. It happened quietly. No ceremony. No throne. Just a man alone, kneeling in the snow. The crown tightened around his head, jewels glowing with terrible light. The whispers rose, not faint, not gentle, but thunderous, 1,000 voices chanting in unison. King. Simon's lips moved. He tried to say his name. But what came out instead was laughter. Hollow, jagged, endless. And the snow never stopped falling. The storm followed Simon wherever he walked. Through empty streets, through hollow towns, snow swirled like a curtain, hiding the world from his eyes. But inside the storm were voices. Not the whispers of the crown this time. Other voices. Small, fragile. Children calling out from the snow. Simon, play with us. Simon, don't leave us. Simon, we're cold. The first vision. One evening, he followed the voices into the frost. And there they were. Children. Dozens of them. Their faces pale. Their lips blue. Their eyes hollow like glass marbles. They danced in a circle around him, their bare feet pressing into the snow, yet leaving no footprints behind. Come sing, Simon, they begged. Come be our king. When he reached for them, his hands passed through air, and the children giggled, voices sharp as icicles breaking. The mother of ice. Among the children stood a woman. Her face was hidden by frost, her hands long and white. She cradled something against her chest, a frozen bundle, a baby that did not cry. She stepped forward, her hollow eyes burning like the jewels of the crown. You took my children, Simon, she whispered, and now you will never give them back. The snow rose higher, burying his legs, choking the air from his lungs. And still the children laughed, their voices echoing through his skull. The madness growing. Simon ripped the crown from his head. For a moment, the storm broke. The children vanished. The woman melted into the air. But so did everything else. The streets were gone. The world was gone. Without the crown, there was only black. Empty, endless black. And the whispers slithered back, soft but merciless. See? Without us, you are nothing. Wear us. Love us. Be our king. Trembling, Simon pressed the crown back onto his skull, and the world returned. But so did the storm. So did the voices. The final warning. That night, as he lay shivering, he saw himself in a vision. Not Simon. Not even a man. But a twisted creature with claws of ice, a beard like frozen rivers, eyes burning blue and hollow. The creature smiled at him. It was his face, his future. And the creature whispered, "I am what you will become. And when you do, Simon will be gone." The laughter in the dark. He woke screaming, his tears freezing on his cheeks. The crown burned cold against his head, digging deeper into his mind. He tried to call his name, but the only sound that left his lips was laughter. Laughter that wasn't his. The children returned, encircling his bed, their hollow eyes glowing faint in the dark. "Sing for us, King," they begged. "Sing until you forget." And the whispers of the crown rose again, louder than ever, drowning out everything that was left of Simon Petrikov. Simon woke one morning to find his mind half empty. Names he once loved were gone. The woman's name, the one he promised to protect, slipped away like melting snow. He knew her face, but not her sound. Her smile lived in his memory, but her name dissolved in his mouth. Each time he tried to speak it, the crown whispered louder, smothering her identity beneath frost. "Forget her," the voices purred. "She was never yours. You are ours. You are king." The palace of ice. Soon the whispers gave him visions. A palace glittering with towers of frost. Windows carved from glaciers. Thrones of frozen bone. When he closed his eyes, he walked its halls. When he opened them, he still saw it shimmering faintly, hovering over the ruins of the real world. The voices told him it was his, that the kingdom was waiting for him, that its people adored him. But when he looked closer, the palace was empty. Its halls echoed with nothing but his own steps. Its people were shadows, smiling without faces, the lies of the crown. At first, Simon fought the illusions. "This is not real," he whispered. "This is not my home." But the crown hissed back. "Then why does it feel so warm? Why does it feel so safe? Why does it feel like love?" And Simon, shivering, let the lies seep deeper. Because lies, wrapped in ice, were kinder than the emptiness left behind. The feast of ghosts. One night in the frozen palace, Simon found himself seated at a long table. Candles of blue fire flickered in the dark. Plates were set, cups filled, chairs occupied by shadowy guests. They all turned to him as he entered. They all whispered his name, not Simon, but King. They raised their cups, they bowed their heads, they laughed hollow laughter. And for a moment, Simon almost smiled. But when he blinked, the plates were filled with snow. The cups brimmed with ice shards. The guests crumbled into frost. And he sat alone in silence. The last journal entry. Desperate, Simon tried again to write. His journal, once filled with neat lines of thought, was now covered in frost-bitten cracks. He carved words into the page with shaking hands. "My name is S." But the rest dissolved into nothing. The crown hissed against his skull, burning cold, refusing to let him finish. He screamed and tore the page out, but even the scream did not sound like his. It echoed, twisted, sharp as shattering glass. The king in the mirror, that night. Simon stared into a frozen mirror. At first he saw himself. Weary, trembling, human. Then the reflection shifted. The beard grew long, the nose hooked, the crown burned brighter. The man in the mirror grinned wide, a grin that cut across his face like a wound. "Simon is gone," the reflection whispered. "You are the Ice King now, and soon you won't even remember there was ever another name." The glass cracked. The vision laughed. And Simon fell to his knees, the crown gleaming as the snow rose higher. The snow never stopped. It fell inside his home, through the cracks of his mind, until every corner froze. Simon wandered the halls of the Phantom Palace, bare feet crunching on ice, breath white against the dark. But he was not alone. Echoes followed him. Footsteps he did not make. Breathing he did not breathe. Whispers too close to ignore. The woman returns. At the end of a corridor, he saw her. The woman whose name he had lost. Her eyes glistened, her hair dark as midnight, her arms reaching toward him. "Simon," she whispered, "you can fight this. Come back to me." He stumbled forward, and tears burning his eyes. For a moment, her warmth cut through the frost. But then her skin cracked. Her smile split wide. Her body shattered into snow, scattering across the frozen floor. And the crown laughed. "She was never real. We are your only love now." The feast of the lost. Another night, he returned to the banquet hall. This time, the shadows at the table wore faces. Friends. Scholars. The people he had once laughed with. They lifted their glasses. They called his name. They begged him to sit with them. He ran to the table, crying, smiling, grasping for their hands. But when he touched them, their flesh turned to frost. Their voices shrieked as they collapsed into dust. The table cracked in half. The hall fell silent. And the whispers filled the void. They are gone. All that remains is us. The children again. The children returned, dancing circles around his bed. But now, they wore masks of ice. Their mouths split too wide. Their eyes were holes that leaked snow. "Sing for us, King," they giggled. "Sing until the world forgets your name." Simon clutched his head, screaming into the storm. The crown burned against his skull, squeezing tighter, melting what little humanity still clung to him. The memory torn away. In desperation, Simon tried once more to write his name. But when he set pen to page, the letters changed before his eyes. Not Simon. Not Petrikov. Only one word carved itself into the frostbitten paper. King. The crown pulsed with satisfaction. And for the first time, Simon couldn't remember what name he was trying to write. The vanishing heart. He returned to the mirror, desperate for proof of himself. But this time, the reflection did not wait. The Ice King stared back instantly, grinning, mocking, mouth dripping with laughter that wasn't his. The reflection reached out, its frozen hand pressing against the glass. And when Simon raised his own hand, they matched perfectly. For a long moment, he could not tell if he was looking at the mirror or at the truth. Snow fell on the desk. The journal lay open, pages blank, ink frozen solid in the well. Simon stared at the emptiness, searching for words, searching for memory. But nothing came. Not his name, not his past, not even the woman's face he had once sworn never to forget. The crown tightened. The whispers sighed. At last, you are empty enough for us to fill. The storm within. The palace of ice swelled larger in his mind. Its towers scraped the heavens. Its frozen gates never closed. In its halls, shadows marched, bowing to their king. Their voices blended into one endless chant. All hail the Ice King. Simon clutched his head, screaming into the blizzard. But the scream carried no pain, only hollow laughter. The storm no longer raged around him. It raged within him. The shattered name. One final time, he whispered. My name is... But the word dissolved on his tongue, like snow touched by fire. The crown hissed in delight, and the laughter spilled from his mouth, sharp, jagged, endless. Simon Petrikov was gone. The man had melted. The name had shattered. Only the king remained. The throne of silence. He climbed the tallest peak of the frozen palace. There a throne of jagged ice awaited. He sat upon it, his crown gleaming, his eyes burning blue. And the world bowed to him, not with love, not with loyalty, but with silence. For no one remained to remember who he once was. The crown pulsed, alive against his skull. The whispers sang, a choir of ghosts locked inside the jewels. And their lullaby never ended. The eternal prison. He tried to rise. He tried to scream Simon's name again. But his body no longer obeyed. The Ice King smiled, and the Ice King laughed, and the Ice King ruled. Inside the crown, buried deep, the last spark of Simon still flickered. A faint cry, a faint plea, a memory of love long lost. But no one heard. The crown kept it hidden. The crown devoured the sound. The haunting without end. So, sleepy cuties, when you close your eyes tonight and dream of snow, be careful. If you hear laughter in the storm, if you see a palace rising in the distance, do not answer the voices. Do not follow the children. Do not listen when the crown whispers your name. For Simon is gone, and the Ice King remains. And once you hear his lullaby, you will never truly wake.